Today, joining me on GHC Coffee Break will be Melinda from Georgia Highlands College talking about scholarships. Get your coffee and we'll be right back.
I'm transferring to the University of West Georgia.
Columbia University.
Kennesaw State.
UGA. Loyola University in Chicago.
Grambling State.
Shorter University. I'm going to Greensboro College, and we all got our start at Georgia Highlands.
No matter where your educational journey takes you, you can get your start at Georgia Highlands College. Georgia Highlands College. Enroll, engage, excel.
Welcome back to GHC Coffee Break. Joining me today is a good friend and colleague at Georgia Highlands College, Melinda King, who works in the financial aid office and scholarships, correct?
Yes.
Okay. One of the things, November happens to be National Scholarship Awareness Month, and it's really, I think, for students and people who think about being students to really understand scholarships and financial aid. And so who better to come in and talk to GHC Coffee Break than someone from Georgia Highlands College. So thank you for joining me, Melinda.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about what you do in your office and how you can help our students and the availability of scholarships.
Well, working in financial aid, our most important job is to make sure that we are helping our students be able to find the resources that they need in order to help them reach their educational goals. And that is for a majority of our students seeking out some type of financial aid. And one of the biggest one is the scholarships, and of course those are the better ones to have because they're free.
Right.
And that usually is what gets our students' attention. And so we are there to assist those students, letting them know where to go, which applications to look at, websites that we have found helpful or even other students have told us that are helpful, so we can make sure they're getting out there and applying for everything that they can.
Why do you think it's so important for students? Well, number one, it does take time to process information, so I think that's really important to talk about too. But why is it important that free money?
Well, free money is better than student loans,
Okay.
which is one of the types of financial aid that we do have available for our students. But those are funds that have to be paid back at some point in time when you're no longer enrolled. And with scholarships, you don't have to do that. And that is why those are a better choice for our students, so that they don't have to have that added expense once they graduate and they're out there and they're in their job and they're in their careers to have to look at paying those back. And with all of the scholarship opportunities that are out there with the federal government and the state government, and even with institutions specifically, each institution usually has their own scholarships that they make available just for their students. And then you also have scholarships that you can just go online and type in scholarship in your search engine window, and there's tons of opportunities out there. It's just letting the students know where to go and letting them know that sometimes with those, especially the external scholarships, it does require a lot of work and a lot of time, but we have had students be very successful in that.
Well, that's good to hear, because that's one of the things when I look back at my college career, the debt, because I want to say maybe the first couple of years I had Pell, because my husband worked part-time, a couple part-time jobs. I worked part-time, sometimes a couple of part-time jobs, tried to go to school full-time. So I think I, at that time, qualified for assistance, Pell Grant for one. Did not have any scholarship at that time, but I did get the Pell Grant. Then I did student loans. And even at a 2-year institution, which is only 2 years as opposed to, of course, then later I added on my bachelor's and then in my master's, so by the time it was all said and done, I had accumulated a good amount of debt from an associate all the way up to a master's, and then later working on my naturopathic doctorate program, that was another loan that had to come into play. So it does accumulate a lot of debt. And, sometimes because even though you're working part-time, you get more loans because you're trying to live while you're going to school, and you don't realize, or maybe even if you do realize that might be your only choice, but that all has to be paid back.
Yes.
And so it can be very stressful to leave. And when I look at Georgia Highlands, and I went to Georgia State, when I hear somebody that goes to Harvard, they're accumulated debt, I'm like, thank God. But even at state institutions, it still accumulates pretty quickly. And at the end of your tenure at the college, and you're going into trying to find a job. Suddenly you're $50,000 in debt.
Yes.
Not counting your regular debt from credit cards, house payments, all of the other things that we've had card payments that we've had to have. So to hear and really help people become more aware of not just the Pell Grant, the Hope Grant, we'll talk a little bit about those specifically later, but the opportunities for scholarship that you don't have to pay back. And I know there are some out there that if you work in a certain area and you're going to teach, for instance, or you're working in a certain area and you're going to be a nurse, some of those debts can be repaid that way by service. So, kind of just let's shoot off some information a little bit about the process.
First of all, most students, once they make the decision that they are going to go to college, the first most important step they can do is to fill out the FAFSA. And that is the free application for federal student aid online. And what that does is it will then go to the schools that they designate on that application.
So they can go to more than one school?
Yes, and we encourage that because you always want to have your first choice and your backup plan because things do change, life changes, and maybe it isn't going to work out for you to go to your dream college, and then you are at the last minute trying to decide, where am I going to go now? And if you already think through that step and it's on your application, that school has already been preparing for you to come without you even knowing that.
That's a good point.
We receive double the FAFSAs per our enrollment every year for students who just thought to put us on their FAFSA, and we still work those students just like we do our regular students. So that way, if they do decide to be here at the very last minute, we've already touched that student and have been in that student's information.
That's awesome.
Yes, and that is why that application is the most important that you can do when you start thinking about where to go to college. And even before that, when you're in high school, you need to be thinking about the Hope Grant, the Hope Scholarship, the Zell Scholarship, because those are things that are determined by what you do through the 9th through 12th grade.
Now, I've heard of the Hope Scholarship, but just in case someone is not really clear on how the Hope Scholarship works, would you explain that, please?
The Hope Scholarship is for high school graduates that have a 3.0 in their core classes. We look at math, we look at science, we look at English, and we don't look at electives. But what Georgia Student Finance does do is determine their GPA to make sure that they have that 3.0. Okay. If the student does, then they are eligible to receive the Hope Scholarship. And what that pays for is a large portion of their tuition at the university level.
So it's not 100%, but it's
not
a portion.
100%, but it is. It's here, and it does vary from institution to institution. Okay. But it's around 85% of the tuition. Okay. So like I said, it does vary, but it pays almost. So the out-of-pocket expenses are very minimal when it does come to what's left over for the tuition to pay.
Okay.
With the Zell scholarship,
Yeah, that one I'm not familiar
which
with.
is new.
This is new for
It
me.
just started 2 years ago. I
Oh, okay.
believe.
Well, I don't feel quite as bad then.
Yes, but it does pay 100% of the tuition. So if that student does go to college, whatever that tuition cost is associated with that class, then tuition is paid 100%.
Now, how does that? How do you qualify for Zell, and how does that work?
They have to have a higher GPA.
Oh,
It is
okay.
a 3.7, and there are
Ooh,
some.
Wow.
Yes, there
On
are
a 4.0
some
scale, that's pretty big.
ACT and SAT requirements that go along with that. But if the student does meet those requirements, then they would have 100% of their tuition paid for when they start school. And with both of those, once students do get into school, they do have to maintain that GPA so that they can continue to receive that throughout their enrollment.
Now, does that cover? Is there a certain amount that's set aside for tuition and fees, and then another amount set aside for books, or is it all one
It
thing?
used to be. They do not do that any longer.
Okay.
It is just tuition. There is no. The students are still responsible for coming up with the fees, and of course their book charges.
Okay.
But that's where other types of aid can come in and pay for the difference of what Hope is not covering or what Zell is not covering. And so that's why it's good to look at all of the type of funding that you have available to you instead of just one, because they can build on top of each other.
Now, will the FAFSA do that for them, or do they have? Is there extra homework they have to do in order to know what else is out there?
You can. We do determine eligibility off of the FAFSA for the Hope Scholarship and Zell, but FAFSA is also used for the Pell Grant, which is another scholarship that a majority of the students use. That is free money, and it is determined by income based and family size. So we're not looking at academics coming in, we're just looking at basically what's going on in that household. What is the expectation that that family can provide towards that student's education? And those, you can receive both. You can receive Hope and Zell and also receive the Pell Grant all at the same time.
Okay. I know. I'm glad that Pell did not rely on my high school, because I was probably a BC student, depending on the course. I had A's. Unfortunately, I had a D or two, much to my chagrin and shame. But it made me more prepared, I think, as a student, because I had to learn I'd already learned how to study. I think some of our students that come in and have gotten A's all through high school, easy peasy, and then they're in for a rude awakening because it's not grade 13.
Yes.
That it really is a quality education that, and one, there used to be a paper that went around as something like, for every hour that you spend in class, you should spend 2 out of class. And students are not prepared, especially students who the A kind of came easy.
Yes.
Because the students actually who were BC students seemed to be better in my classes. And I know that sounds strange, but it's because they knew how to study and know it takes a little bit extra work to earn that A.
Exactly.
Whereas the A student that comes in, I got this.
Yes.
and some of them are really like that, I got this. No, not quite. So I think that it's really important that there are more things out there that provide them with the same opportunity, even if they don't have. I mean, I was a BC. I ended up being an A. You know, I graduated with honors in my college career. I graduated with a 4.0 in my naturopathic degree. 3-something in my bachelor's and master's, and at Highlands I think I graduated with a 3-something. Maybe 3.7, I don't know, I can't remember. But the bottom line is, I was not what I thought of as college material. So knowing that you can say, oh, I'm not college material, I can't get the grants, I can't get these things, the reality is there's other options.
True. And even if a student doesn't have the Hope Scholarship coming out of high school, doesn't mean that they can't get it. And that's one of the things that I think those students don't realize, is that it is still an option for them after they're here for 30 hours. If they meet that GPA requirement, they can apply for Hope and receive it, and then start taking it through their next semesters with them.
And I think we're going to have to, we do have to take a break. There's a lot of good information. Get your coffee and we'll be right back.
Seven 7,000 high school students drop out every school day. That's a line of desks more than 4 miles long. We can keep students in school. Visit boostup.org and take the first step.
Welcome back to GHC Coffee Break. To me, I'm talking about a very exciting subject, school education, how to get there free as much as possible,
Yes.
or at least with some great financial assistance. Melinda, I really appreciate you coming from Georgia Highlands over to the studio today at
Thank
Georgia
you.
Highlands, the TV show. GHC Coffee Break is a really good opportunity for our audience to learn more about scholarships in general, but also Georgia Highlands scholarships. I think as we left to go to commercial, we were talking about the Hope Grant, and then that you can, there is hope.
Yes.
Yeah, even if you didn't have that 3.0 in high school, but have decided I'm going to go to college. I really find a focus, and this is what I want to do with my life, that there is hope. Literally and physically, to get after 30 hours. So I think that's really good.
Yes, well, as you mentioned, students get here and then they realize, I can do this. I am college material, and they came in maybe not having the Hope Scholarship from high school. That is something they can gain at that 30-hour mark, and if they meet those requirements, they can take it. And even if you have students that do have the Hope Scholarship and they lose it, there are still opportunities for them to gain it back. So we don't want those students to get frustrated or think, because I don't have it, I can't get it, or it's not an option for me, because it still is. And even if they lose it, we don't want them to get discouraged if they come in and think, I've got this. High school came easy to me, and then they do find themselves struggling and maybe they lose it. They do have that opportunity to gain it back.
I think that's important to realize too. I think for a lot of people, when and I was a non-traditional. I came back after 6-7 years of being out of high school, 5 or 6 years. And I really, what kept me here, and when I think of scholarship, it's not just the physical money. A scholarship is also an attitude, a scholarly attitude. I didn't really have it. The first class I ever took here was in a summer, which summer is short. It was a history class, which was not my top subject back then. I'll come to love and I think as I get older, appreciate it more. But I made a C. And I thought, okay, I'm not college material. I don't need to be here. I wanted to be here, but I thought, I can't do this. I talked to my professor. And I will never, and I tell him, what I'm saying to you in public, I've said to him in private, so I'm not telling any secrets, but I have told him, you're responsible for me. Dr. Cook, the history teacher, James Cook, written a couple books about Georgia Highlands history, actually. He said, to make a C in my class in a full quarter back then, 10 weeks, is good. To make it in short time, don't give up. All he would have had to say is, yeah, if you can't make a C in my history class, then you're not gonna be successful. Or anything, any little something that could have been discouraging, or even just not responsive at all, then I would have said, see ya, don't wanna be ya. But he didn't. And that's one of the things I love about our college here, is that the faculty members that I have contact with and for the most part that I hear from other students that have contact with, they really do care, and they really do encourage scholarship, not just the financial aspect of scholarship.
Yes.
And so I'm very honored to be a part of that, and to be in a college that's that. Going back to the fiscal aspect of it. So they filled out the FAFSA. They've qualified. They either Hope, Zelle, or neither. They get Pell. They have a need. Pell does not have to be paid back. Let's talk a little bit about if you have to go into, because you do not want to use a credit card to pay for your college. I mean, with the interest rates and everything, the credit card's not the way to go. But there are some really good loans that can help while you're in college.
There are. We always offer our students at least one of the options of student loans. You have the subsidized Stafford student loan and the unsubsidized.
Now, explain the difference of those.
That difference is the subsidized student loan, the interest that is accrued is actually paid by the federal government. So no interest is accrued while you are attending class, while you are still enrolled. So what that means is at the end, when I call it the sticker shock, when you get that final statement, when you've shown that you're no longer enrolled for 6 months, what you are looking at is still that original principal amount that you borrowed.
Okay.
There's been no interest that is accumulated over that course of time. With the unsubsidized Stafford loan, it does start accruing interest within that first 30 days or from the time of disbursement. And so when you do get that sticker shock at the end, you not only have that principal amount, but you have however much interest has accumulated over the course of your enrollment. So you were
why would
looking,
you choose that option?
some students may not have that option. It is determined on eligibility.
Okay.
You do, in order to get the subsidized student loan, you do have to show a need.
Okay.
It is income based. And so if you were lucky enough to be able to have the choice, the subsidized is definitely the choice to go.
That's why I'm going, okay, now why would I want the other one?
And then sometimes if the unsubsidized is the only option, or we do have students that are faced with looking at getting both. They just, between how much we can offer a student through the year, one may not be enough and they may need to pull from those unsubsidized funds in order to get through the year financially or help take that financial burden off of their family a little bit.
And I want to say here, because I've seen it, I've worked, like I said, as an administrator before, going to a predominant faculty role and director of the Human Services Program at Georgia Highlands. But I just want to make a comment to students that use your student loans, use your student money for classes and books, because I still get students, and it breaks my heart, that will come in, I don't have a book, I don't have money for a book.
Yes.
They had money for a book, but guess what? And I understand sometimes it is to put groceries on the table. I get it. But then when you find out they have cable, they have a brand new car, they have, there's got to be some fiscal responsibility on their side as well.
I remember I was fortunate enough that when I went through my bachelor's that I had a good financial aid, higher ed background at that time. So I did try to borrow as responsibly as I could. And one of the things that I do share with the students from experiences, myself and other students, is that just because we offer it doesn't mean you have to take it.
Yeah.
And to only borrow what you need, and to
Yes.
think about what you need out of those loans and out of your finances through that period of time. Because when you do get to the end and you look at that statement and say, oh my gosh, how did I borrow that much? I don't remember borrowing that much. It does come as a surprise. And even for someone who did have that background and did kind of know what she should have been doing, it was still a surprise to me. And so that's always my advice. And a lot of times the students, just because they're sitting on the other side of the desk, they think that we don't go through those struggles.
Right. I think that's
That
a good point.
everything is easier, or we know more than they do. And we don't. We had to find our way through our educational goals and through our degrees, just like
Absolutely.
they did. And talking to your professors or reaching out and
Yeah.
being a not so successful traditional student myself, but a successful non-traditional student, I do focus a lot of that success on being engaged with my instructors, being
Yes.
engaged with the college and with people in the offices, in the
There's a
enrollment.
wonderful services here: counseling, financial aid, the business office, your student service. I mean, there's a lot of things. I know we only have about 3 minutes left, so I want to make sure we include the scholarship aspect.
Yes.
Through our foundation. I know there is a Felicia Claxton Memorial Scholarship, which is for human service majors. They have to be in their last year. There's certain qualifications in which they can go online and find, but there's other scholarships as well.
There are, and the benefit of having it through the GHC Foundation is that these scholarships are specifically for our students. Those are there, those are supported by Georgia Highlands for our students. And students who apply for those, because you are looking at a smaller group of students, their chances of receiving those scholarships are much higher
Yes.
than if they did go online and just did an external search through the internet or through their search engines. And with that comes the backing of, if you are granted a Georgia Highlands Scholarship, you have us behind you. And so there is that extra bit of support there with that. So we always tell our students to go online. It's on our website. If you go to our scholarship links, it takes you to the foundation scholarships. And we do see that sometimes those scholarships do go unutilized throughout the year. And so a lot
crazy.
of students don't apply because they think, oh, I won't get it. And I tell them to go out and apply for any that they can.
Anything and everything.
Because there are some that are specific for their program of study, but there's some that are just specific to the county that they live in.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that. So if they don't go out there and they don't see it and they don't go to that website, they may not apply.
Yeah, and I know there's some non-traditional emergency funds sometimes. There's a lot of different things that we can only tell them so much, and if we don't, we try to give them information, but sometimes it's a matter of being asked the question to know how to answer it. You got to ask the question.
And it's not just about their program of study, because we do have a large population of students who are undecided.
Yes.
And
or
so
general
it could
studies or whatever.
just be a bookstore scholarship. And so those are things that they do need to check continuously, because the deadlines do change based on, some are for the year, some are for the semester. So you always want to be checking in advance through our GHC Foundation scholarships to make sure that you know when those deadlines are, so that although a student may have missed them for this year, they can prepare in advance for next year.
And I think that's really good. And I think deadline accountability is another one of
Yes.
those things, because truly, if you miss a deadline, it can prevent you from having that as resources for, as you said, maybe a whole year, not just a semester. So great information. We'll be right back with GHC Coffee Break.
Hi, may I please have an application? Thank you.
Skip the drama. Get your diploma.
Okay.
Take that first step towards a better future. Find free adult education classes at finishyourdiploma.org.
Welcome back to GHC Coffee Break. Melinda, I think that the information you've provided has been very helpful. There could be someone out listening in our audience today that goes, okay, this is possible. I'm going to go to GHC. I'm going to put you on the spot. In the next probably 20 to 25, 30 seconds, I want you to start naming all of the scholarships you can think of, either external or internal. I'll broaden the scope a little bit. And you're on.
Okay, well, with the GHC Foundation, I know we have the Adams Criminal Justice. We also have nursing degrees, and I do get all of them confused, so I apologize, but we have them set aside for first-year nursing students and second-year nursing students. We also have the scholarship abroad, so that if students do want to go and earn credit outside of the classroom, outside of the country, that they can apply for that scholarship to help. And then we have the non-traditional scholarship. I know we have a Paulding County scholarship where it's for Paulding County residents. I think there's one for Cartersville as well. I think there's one for Rome as well. And
Felicia Claxton Memorial
Felicia
Scholarship.
Claxton Memorial, yes. And then we also have the Randy Pierce. We have Carolyn Hamrick.